Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 8minutemovement.com. My name is Rob Gardner, and we are on day 28 of the 8minutemovement.com. We are almost 30 days in, and we are in this series on the adventure, talking about how our experiences in serving Christ and living for Jesus is way more of an adventure than living in the world. And the topic today is not going to sound like an adventure when you hear it, but I truly believe it is one of the biggest adventures of serving Jesus. And my goal for today is to rewire the way you think about it, to restructure the way that you look at this word. And that word is alone, the adventure of being alone. Now, there's a lot of different preconceived notions about the idea of being alone. Way back in the beginning of the Bible, God created Adam. And he said, hey, it's not good for man to be alone. I got to create a suitable helper. And so he created Eve and kind of set this precedent that we're not supposed to be alone. You'll hear people and Christians go the cliche route and say that, oh, you're never alone because you always have Jesus. As long as Jesus is in your life, you're never, ever, ever alone. And reality is that being alone is not a state. In other words, a lot of people look at alone as like some status, You go to your Facebook page and it says, I'm alone, or I'm single, or being alone is this physical thing, I'm in a room alone, and so if there's nobody else in the room with me, then I'm alone. Or it's a popularity thing. Well, people don't like me, so I'm alone. The reality is, being alone is a feeling. It is an emotion. Just like being in love, just like being happy, like being sad, being angry, being upset. These are all emotions. And the thing with emotions is you can't argue with them. If somebody tells you they feel alone, or they feel happy, they feel sad, you can't go, no, you don't. That's how they're feeling. If they're generally feeling alone, they're feeling alone. You cannot turn around and say, well, just because you're feeling alone doesn't mean you're not alone, because, we're here for you and we support you and whatnot, because in reality, being alone is more than just being surrounded by people. In fact, you can have people in your life who love you, support you, are there for you, and are the best people in the world, and you can still feel alone. And to no fault of theirs. It doesn't mean that they're not doing wrong. There's been times in the last even week that I have felt alone. Does that mean my wife hasn't been there for me? No, my wife is the most amazing woman in the world. She supports me to the end of the world. She follows me blindly. I would not trade her for any woman on the planet. And there's nothing she could do differently for me. But there's still times I feel alone. How is that possible? Because being alone really comes down to being in a situation where you feel like you are the only person who has the weight of the feelings that you have at that moment. You are the only person that's going through what that's going through. And even though there are people around you that see what you're going through, and they may be sympathetic for what you're going through, they may not completely have that feeling that they have. And it's so hard, because when you get in a situation where you are facing something that nobody else is facing, where do you turn? Well, of course you turn to Jesus. Well, that's great, and we turn to Jesus and we pray, but at the same time, who do we talk to that really understands our situation, our difficulty? Oh, you turn to Jesus, you talk to Jesus. Well, that's great, but what happens when God doesn't give us an answer? What happens when God doesn't show up and say, this is why it is the way it is? What happens when God doesn't point in a clear direction and say, this is where we're supposed to go? It makes being alone extremely difficult. And there's many different facets of it. There's facing things alone. There's not having friends in your life and feeling like you're alone. There's not having people understand you. There's all different types of being alone. But what I want to do today is change your view on being alone. Because a lot of people see being alone as this horrible thing. And it's not an easy thing. It's not an enjoyable thing. However, I truly believe, as I've prayed and gone through my struggles on being alone, that being alone is one of the greatest blessings that God can bestow on somebody. I really truly believe that when God allows you a season of being alone, it is one of the most powerful seasons that God can place you in. And it means that it's one of the biggest purposes that God can have for your life. You say, what are you talking about, Rob? How can you say that? Well, let's look at some things that God allows us to be alone for, okay? First of all, I believe that God allows us to be alone to gain confidence in ourselves. There is something about facing things and conquering things on our own that help us to gain confidence in who we are. You look back to the life of Jesus and how God allowed Jesus to be alone in that desert, to go to that place and be alone in that desert. And again, we like to think of God as always showing up and always having some powerful move of God anytime we feel alone, and praying and hearing these great voices from God. Jesus went to the desert to fast for 40 days and 40 nights. What did he get? Did he get some powerful, miraculous move of God? Did God show up and show his glory and reveal himself to Jesus? No, he got the devil. He got the devil sitting there trying to tempt him to eat, trying to tempt him to throw himself off a cliff. He got temptation. But in that moment, as Jesus faced the enemy and he held on to God's word and he went through that alone without his disciples there, without a support system, he gained strength and confidence to go through and face trials without people as a crutch, without people to help him. And at that time when it became time for him to die on the cross, he had that confidence to ride, to push through, to say, you know what, I can do this. I don't want to do this. I'm scared to do this, but I know I can do this because I have faced this temptation before and I have beaten it. And I'm not suggesting that we be Lone Rangers and just run around through life without it. We don't need anybody. I mean, when we can have people in our lives to encourage us, to support us, to build us up, to hold us accountable, those are all great, great, great things. But there will be seasons in your life that God will allow you to be alone, to show you that you do have what it takes, that you do have what it takes to stand alone. Think about the temptations you face. If you never can succeed against those temptations except when people are constantly around you, how are you ever going to have confidence that you can overcome a temptation? Doesn't mean the temptations go away, but we have to learn how to face those things alone. We have to face those trials alone. Just like the guy in the end of the action movie that's got to face the bad guy one-on-one. This is our opportunity to face the bad guy. The second thing, God allows us to be alone to change us permanently forever. You look back through the Bible, and you look at people like Jacob, who wrestled alone with God, and the angel of the Lord touched his hip, and his hip was structurally changed forever, and he continued through life with this limp. He was never the same because of that one-on-one experience with God. You think about Moses, who went and saw God face to face, and the glory of the Lord came on him, and he walked down, and his face shone. He had this brightness on him because he was literally transformed by being one-on-one with God. There is something that happens when we get alone with Christ, when we get into seasons in our life where we have to face God alone, where God literally transforms us. He interjects things into us. He makes us permanently different. There are some changes that happen to us. We go, we have an exciting service, we hear a good song, we hear a powerful message, and we see change in our lives, and that change may or may not stick around because we have to commit to that change. But when we get alone with God, when we get into the seasons of our life where God truly allows us to be alone, what he's doing, how he's shaping us, how he's molding us, he is doing permanent, forever life change. The stuff that you never shrink away from, the stuff that you never turn away from, the strength that he gives you, it is a permanent change. It is a mind shift and a heart shift that lasts for eternity. And it's not fun, and it's not enjoyable again, but we have to understand that God is working through that. And it brings me to point 3, and it brings all of this home, and that's this. When God allows us to be alone, when we're in seasons that we are alone, it means that God is training us to change the world. To change the world. You say, how can that be possible? Well, because in order to change the world, if you want to change the world, if you want to make a difference in the world, if you want to leave your mark, if you have a cause that you want to fight, an agenda that you want to fight, an area of life that you want to change the way the world views, any of those things, and you want to do that, then in order to be successful in that, in order to be successful and to stay true to that cause, that mission that God's placed in your heart, that passion that's in your life, and it doesn't even have to be some massive thing like I want the entire world to do that. It could be changing your world around you. It could be changing the life of one individual who then goes and changes the world. Whatever it is, though, it's going to be attacked. It's going to be fought. It's going to be countered. We've talked before about how when you stand for truth and when you stand for things, people are going to fight you. They're going to pull you away from it. They're going to disagree with you. And you are going to get to a point, if you really want to change the world, you are going to get to a point where you're going to stand alone. And you're going to have to believe that what you're fighting for is real and exists despite everybody else standing in your way. And what being alone allows us to do, it trains us, it teaches us how to stand on our own 2 feet, to live for God just because of our relationship with God, not because of a pastor that's speaking to us, not because of a friend that lifts us up, but just because it's just us and Jesus, that ability to stand with Christ and to know, hey, I'm going to have this relationship with you, Jesus, even when I feel alone, even when there's no one to encourage me, even when there's no one to be there for me or support me, even when no one understands what I'm going through. We have that opportunity to get that confidence, to get that change in our hearts, to be trained so that when that time comes, that pivotal time comes, and we have to stand for something that's right in the wake of many people disagreeing with us, we don't shrink back. We don't give up. We don't get discouraged. We don't quit because we know what it's like to stand for something alone. We know what it's like to keep going towards something when everything else around you is saying to hold back, when everything else around you is saying you can't make it. We know what it is like to push forward through that crowd and to grab that hem of Jesus' garment, to know, like that lady did who was injured or sick that day, if she could just reach Jesus, if she could just touch him, in the wake of people stepping on her because they couldn't even see her, the crowd was so tight, she's getting stepped on her arms, she's getting stepped on her hands, her feet, her back, people are stepping in her hair, she's getting dirty as she drags herself across this dirt road, but she just is reaching out because it doesn't matter. Even though everybody else is doing something different, even though she's alone on that ground, she just knows if she can get a hold of Jesus in her life, that all will be well. And I want to tell you today, if you feel alone in any area of your life, I know it hurts and I know it's hard. Don't be discouraged. Don't quit. You reach for Jesus. You get a hold of him. You let him continue to train you and prepare you. And know that this season of being alone is not in vain. It's not empty. It's not just to punish you, to leave you difficult times, to make you struggle, to hurt you. It's not anything like that. God is preparing you for a powerful purpose. And I believe if you learn how to stand for Christ even when you're alone, then you'll be able to stand for Christ in any situation. And there is no limit to what God can do through you to change this world. I hope this series on the adventure has been helpful to you. It's been helpful to me because as I've gone through this, God has challenged me on every one of these areas. And we're growing together. This isn't just me coming and spewing knowledge to you and helping you grow, and I'm growing through this. This is what God's showing me as I pray, as I struggle, as I challenge myself, as I feel some of these same things that you're feeling. I, too, am growing from this. And this particular lesson today is just a perfect example of how God is helping me through some struggles in my life, and I really hope that it'll help you through some struggles with your life. I'm so thankful that you took the time to watch this all the way through. Please, if you guys have questions, if you guys have struggles, if you have things you want to hear topics about, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Shoot us a message on Facebook.com. You can find us at Facebook.com/8MinuteMovement. We would love to talk with you. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to help you any way we can. My name is Rob Gardner with 8MinuteMovement.com. We will see you next week.